So what if I told you that the core ideas of modern atomic physics didn't actually start in the 20th century, but more than 1,000 years earlier? We're going to dive into an incredible story where ancient wisdom seems to predict modern science.
Okay, so we all learn this in school, right? Everything around us, the air we breathe, the chair you're sitting on, even our own bodies, it's all made of atoms. They're the basic building blocks of, well, everything. And we usually think of guys like Bohr and Heisenberg, scientists from the early 20th century, as the ones who figured this out. But is that the whole story? I mean, what if that idea is way, way older?
Well, to find out, we've got to travel back in time. And I mean way back, all the way to the 8th century Middle East and into the school of a truly remarkable scholar named Imam Jafar al-Sadiq.
And this is where it gets absolutely fascinating. Over 1,200 years ago, Imam al-Sadiq was teaching that the world is composed of minute, indivisible particles. I mean, come on, that sounds ridiculously modern, right?
Okay, so how deep do these parallels really go? Let's dig in and start by looking at his view of the world of particles. All right, just look at this side by side. On the left, a fundamental principle of 20th century physics, and on the right, the Imam's teachings from the 8th century. But he didn't just talk about indivisible particles. He also suggested that energy could be released from them. I mean, that's a concept that basically lays the groundwork for the principles of nuclear energy. And just think about how relevant that is today. These ideas are at the very heart of so much of our modern world, from the energy that powers our cities to the radiation therapy that saves lives. Seriously, the foresight here is just staggering.
But here's the thing, this wasn't just some lucky scientific guess. For the Imam, these ideas were tied to something way bigger, the relationship between science and divine wisdom.
You see, these weren't just random scientific thoughts. They were woven into a complete worldview, a philosophy that was trying to make sense of the entire universe in a really holistic way.
And this is the absolute heart of it. For Imam al-Sadiq, science and faith weren't enemies, not at all. Science was actually a doorway to faith. The idea was, by studying the natural world, by understanding how creation works, you could get a much clearer glimpse of the Creator.
Now, his thinking didn't just stop with a super small. He also looked up to the cosmos, where he drew a really crucial line between the science of astronomy and the practice of astrology. So first up, you've got astronomy. He saw this as a legitimate science, the study of how planets move, the distances between stars, the actual physical laws that govern the universe. This was a real, valid field of study. But then you have astrology. This is the belief that the position of the stars can actually predict our fate and directly control our lives. And when it came to this topic, well, let's just say the Imam had a very different and very firm take on it.
So yeah, he was all about the real science. He was discussing things that were incredibly advanced for his day, like the Earth's motion and the huge scale of the stars. He was pushing his students to actually observe, to calculate, not to just believe what they were told.
And that brings us to a really crucial part of his legacy, how he directly and powerfully took on this ancient practice that was, everywhere back then.
So get this, there's this really powerful story. A guy comes to the Imam, and he's clearly very worried. An astrologer had looked at the stars and told him that a child was destined to die. So the Imam's response, it wasn't some scientific lecture. It was theological. It was profound. He quoted the Quran, basically making the powerful case that knowledge of the future, the unseen, belongs to God and God alone, not to someone trying to read the stars.
Okay, and then there was another time when a man proudly told the Imam that he made his living as an astrologer, using the stars to advise people and predict things for them.
And the Imam's reply was, wow, super sharp, no room for misunderstanding. He told the man, you made yourself despicable with that title. He saw it as not just being wrong, but as something that actually brought a person down.
So his stance on this, absolutely crystal clear. He was standing up for both rational, scientific thought and for his core faith, arguing that you just can't use the stars to claim you know things that belong only to God.
So, when you take all of this, from the tiny atom to the massive stars, it all comes together to form this really powerful legacy of inquiry.
So when we kind of put it all on the table, you see this incredible dual legacy. He championed rational thought, right? And he drew a hard line between real science and superstition. But, and this is key, he did all of this within a framework where knowledge ultimately led you back to a deeper understanding of faith.
What you end up with
is a legacy that's both super smart, intellectually rigorous, but also deeply spiritual. It's a call to look closely at the world around us, while at the same time rejecting the easy answers that superstition offers.
And all this leaves us with one last big question to think about. When we find these sparks of scientific genius in places, in times where we weren't really taught to look for them, how does that change the way we see the whole story of human knowledge? It's a really powerful thought to leave you with.